When we arrived at the river, James got in his boat for the first time. He hadn't been in a Packraft, and he tightened down his thigh straps and he rocked back and forth a little bit on the shore. It was rainy, we were pretty wet, but he had a huge grin on his face and he looked up at me and he said, "This is not shit."
Now then, my first ever sit in an alpaca raft, and it actually looks like you can do things with it. I'm very impressed.
To use Packraft was Dan's idea, and James was along for the ride, but he wasn't convinced it was the right way to go. I met Dan 2 years ago in India, in Meghalaya, and Dan was friends with James. When we were in India, Dan proposed that crossing Iceland would be kind of the ideal test of these Packrafts for the alpaca boats. He was really interested in doing it by going over the ice. He hadn't been on skis before, so that was exciting for him. But we made it happen, pulled in James. I flew over from Alaska. We met in Reykjavik. Dan and James both showed up with boots that they'd never worn before and skis that were already out of fashion when I was in high school. We took a bus from Reykjavik to Jökulsárlón. That's a glacial river lagoon in the southeast corner of the island. And arrived at midnight, it was in the rain, couldn't see anything, couldn't see our ice approach. I was nervous about the route. We were on bare ice for the first couple of days, about 15 miles. But the cracks were really friendly. They were open kind of like V's rather than slots. So the hazard of slipping, falling into a crack wasn't that great. We were able to just walk through with crampons and eventually got to snowline and roped up, and were able to move a little bit faster in the snow, but really not much just because it was so soggy, so wet. And then my ski broke and there was just fog the whole time. It was pretty brutal. Basically, we were navigating by GPS and compass, and so just head down looking at the compass for 3 days straight. The highlight of being on the ice was getting off the ice. We dropped below the clouds. We could see interior Iceland for the first time. It was skiable. James was able to rip down and make turns. Dan did some snow plowing at the top. Remember, he's never been on skis. And I was able to kind of falling leaf my way down with the one ski just taped together.
Land. Oh. And it's even harder to walk on.
So we made it. We put in on the river and we were psyched, all smiles, free miles, you know, finally letting gravity do some work for us. But pretty soon the channel braided out into too many braids. So we packed up our stuff and walked to the next main channel. Got in that one, we were psyched, all smiles again, we're making good time. And then that one also braided out, got too thin. In that case, it was because there was a fresh lava flow, like really fresh, like last year fresh. It was still steaming, that had changed the course of the river. We hopped up on the shore and walked to the steam, and that was really cool. There were jeep tracks that were truncated by the lava. It was so fresh, so raw. This part of the island was just lunar, just absolutely foreign. No plants, like not even lichen. So we're at the steam vents, and we gotta pack up the boats one more time, head west to the next main channel. And this one on the map, this is supposed to be the main channel. And we get to it, and it's awesome. It's clear. It had been particularly cold this summer, so there wasn't that much glacial silt in the river. And the nature of the river for the next couple of days was flat, not meaning slow, but just calm water, meandering a bit, and then a nasty steep waterfall drop most of those we walked just the drop part, and then we're able to put in below where it canyoned out, and there would be some nice big water, class 4 standing waves and rapids, and those were all super fun. On one evening, the rain turned to snow. Pretty late at night, we're ready to get off the water, and it starts to snow, and we see this shelter, this box structure, and this whole time Dan had been talking about these mystical emergency shelters that Iceland has all over, but we haven't seen any. So we get there, and it's not an emergency shelter, it's a weather station. And it's just like almost too much to handle. We were so cold and miserable at this point. So we poke around the weather station a bit and eventually figure out we can jimmy the lock and go inside and move like a nitrogen tank around, and there was a seismometer. It really didn't look like it was functional, this weather station. But if it was functional, it got some weird measurements while we were in there. And we just sardined in, and it was so nice. We woke up in the morning, there were 3 inches of snow. This is mid-July, just kind of unacceptable in my book. Pretty soon we're coming up to these gnarly waterfalls, like 11 meters, 30 meters, 45 meters. And we know they're coming, and they're pretty easy to see. Probably half a mile away we could see the first mist, like a plume of mist coming off this waterfall. We just decided to portage the whole chunk. That was about 6 miles that we walked. And we pushed late into the night that night to just get it done with, do the whole portage so that in the morning we could raft the canyon. So this canyon was awesome. It was sustained, class 4. It's what I had been nervous about the whole trip. And the reason I feel pretty comfortable in class 4, but this big water stuff is different. It's like you are supposed to go in the meat of the rapid. Like you go in the middle where it looks the burliest, which is just not intuitive for me. So these guys would get me lined up, and I'd just follow their tail through. And I would go into these rapids thinking, you're kidding me, right? Like, there's no reason I should be right here. Like, why aren't we off on the side skirting this? But if you're on the side, you're into all these weird eddies and whirlpools, and the water is climbing and dropping. If you're in the middle, there are these big wave trains, but you just kind of get bounced around. But I was gripped. I was totally on edge and white-knuckled, and I didn't take pictures, I didn't take video, we just got through it. It was a beautiful canyon, like these incredible basalt cliff walls with all this columnar jointing. Like, we could not have asked for a more beautiful setting for that water. We finished with a pretty painful 10 miles of flat class 1 water just to get to the beach, and Dan jumped in. James and I are just kind of over it. One of the coolest things about this trip was sort of the reminder of how much my motivation to adventure is driven by wanting to learn and wanting to improve. So even though the weather was crap and we couldn't see the scenery for the first half of the trip, it was awesome to sort of push my comfort zone a little bit and come out of that feeling like a better paddler.
Thoughts on Iceland, James?
Thoughts on Iceland? I should have known, the clue being in the name, that it was going to be very cold, but it surprised even me. Extremely cold. Mid-July. Mid-July. Do you know what? Do you know what I really miss? Fog. Really miss fog. I wish we'd seen some fog on this trip. It would have been lovely.